Dietrich Mateschitz was 41 years old when he started Red Bull. 35 years later, at the time of his passing, he was worth over $27 billion, and Red Bull was recognized. This little can was recognized by 90% of the global population. He is one of the most effective marketers and unique and enigmatic founders of our time, entrepreneurs of our time. And Red Bull is one of the most successful brands of all time. What started as an idea that came to Mateschitz while he was looking at a Japanese newspaper on a work trip, while he was a marketing director selling deodorant, has taken the world by storm. Red Bull has created sports, created sporting events, created an entire industry, really. They've taken over sports like F1, for example, and they are one of the most recognized brands in the world. In this episode, we're going to study the man behind Red Bull, Dietrich Mateschitz, how he founded it, what made him tick, how he lived and operated as a marketer and a founder, and Red Bull, the actual brand and the marketing principles that they employed to literally sell billions and billions and billions and billions of cans of this little energy drink across the world. Let's dive in. But believing in something and convincing the world to believe in it with you are two very different things. That's where Dietrich Mateschitz excelled. He took a strange, ultra-caffeinated tonic from Thailand, reimagined it, and gave it a story, an identity, a purpose. He turned a drink into a lifestyle, a can into a mindset. Instead of competing with Coca-Cola and Pepsi in the trenches of traditional advertising, he created his own battlefield. Extreme sports, high-energy events, content that made people feel alive. He made Red Bull something people wanted to be a part of, not just something to consume. And that's branding at its highest level. That is an excerpt from the foreword of the book we're going to go over today about the Red Bull story and its founder, Dietrich Mateschitz. It's an incredible story. Dietrich is a very fascinating guy. Red Bull's story is absolutely incredible. There's so much to be learned about branding. This is going to be an interesting episode because there's not much information about Dietrich or Red Bull out there. They're very, very private company. They hold a lot of things to their chest, and that is because Dietrich Mateschitz, the founder, who has since passed away, he was the same way. He was extremely mysterious. Somebody later at the end of the book said that they've never seen the internet so wiped clean of a person. He was very private, very kept to himself, intentional about interviews and things like that, and we'll get into him. Red Bull is very much the same. So this book was kind of pieced together by the author, Wolfgang Feuerweger, however you say that. I guess that's Austrian or German, but he did a good job putting together as many pieces of the founding of the Red Bull brand, what their intent, their strategies and tactics that we know of, and then also he dives into Dietrich as a person. What we'll do to start is to just kind of give you a rundown of the highlights, and then we're going to dive in a little deeper. But first, since this is about Red Bull, just cracked one open in honor of the episode, a little Red Bull on a Red Bull episode. Dietrich Mateschitz was born in Austria in, I can't remember the name, but it's the same area, same region, very rural region that Arnold Schwarzenegger was born around the same time. Near the end of World War II, very moderate circumstances. Parents were not rich by any means. He studied marketing in college, and it took him 10 years, which I find to be very funny, and we'll get into a little bit of his personality and why that was the case. He worked at Unilever, which is a huge multinational conglomerate. He worked his way up. He was very competent in marketing. He always had a knack for it, so he worked his way up to like a pretty high role in that company, selling like soaps and deodorants and stuff for a subsidiary of Unilever, I believe. This caused him to travel a lot all over the world. And that's very important because his travels are ultimately what led him to the idea of Red Bull. We'll get into it, the details, but he was on a trip and he saw this thing in the newspaper and he's like, what's this? Then he looked into it and then he tried it and he's like, holy crap, this is the best thing ever. And then he ends up building the brand around it. But let's get into it. That's a little bit of the highlights of his life. First thing I want to note, as I mentioned, he worked at Unilever for a long time, like 10, 15 years. He was 38 years old when he came across the idea. I believe the company was founded when he was 41 years old. So think about that. This is a lesson that I've talked about many times, but 41 years old, he died worth like $40 billion, one of the wealthiest people in the world. Sam Walton was 44 when he started Walmart. James Dyson was 44 when he started Dyson vacuums. He's now worth $15 billion. Sam Walton's family is worth 430. Estee Lauder was 38 when she founded Estee Lauder. Jim Sinegal of Costco founded Costco at 46. Ray Kroc founded McDonald's at 52. Harlan Sanders founded KFC at 62. The lessons go on and on and on. There's so many examples of this, of people not coming into their own or not finding what it is their life's mission is or what they're going to dedicate the vast majority of the back end of their life to until they're 40, 50 years old. I think that's an important lesson because persistence is the most important virtue. Because it's the ability to stay in the game, to not give up, to have faith in the plan until the idea comes to you. It's very common in today's world, I think, for young men in particular with social media and all the comparison and all the stuff that we have access to now to see these young dudes. It's not bad, but you see these young guys doing very, very, very well. I mean, you've got the Snapchat founders, Mark Zuckerberg, all these like young multi-deca billionaires, and even guys on smaller scales that are multi-millionaires in their teens and early 20s and mid-20s and early 30s. It's not always the case. And just because you have not found the idea, you have not created the wealth or provided the service or built the value yet, if you stay in the game, it is entirely possible. And those are just a few examples of people who stay in the game and reap some serious rewards. So the note here that I have next is world-changing. I wrote life-changing, and then I scratched that life and said world-changing idea from a newspaper article. This is a profound story because it just shows God will speak to you in very weird ways, very unique ways. You will glean or gain insight into a vision from very unique, interesting things that may seem trivial in the moment, but they can lead to life-changing journeys. I believe Charlie Munger said something like, the key is to take a very simple idea very seriously, something like that. But to the book, one article in particular caught their attention. The magazine presented a ranking of Japan's top taxpayers. The managers found this quite amusing, but Mateschitz remained serious. He noticed that the top spot wasn't occupied by a global corporation like Sony or Toyota, but rather by an entirely unknown industrial firm called Taisho Pharmaceuticals. This company was listed as the producer of a beverage called Lipovitan. The product was reputed to have invigorating effects due to its taurine content, and it had been internationally successful since 1963. So literally this is when he's like, holy crap, what's going on? It's not Toyota, it's not Sony, it's not these huge companies that we've all heard of. It's some random company that owns this drink. That's the richest person in Japan, the highest taxpayer. Fascinating. That's what got him to ultimately start figuring out what's going on. He ends up, I believe, he travels to Thailand, and there's this like a similar drink called Krating Dang, however I don't speak Thai, so whatever that is. And it's a very similar drink. I believe Krating Dang, I'll say that. I believe that means Red Bull in Thai. And it's owned by this family. Mateschitz essentially partners up with them and says, hey, look, you guys have this here. This is great. It's your idea. Let me take it globally. So they end up doing that. They each invest, he invests his entire savings, and I think they each invest like $500,000 or something to that effect to start, and he literally invests his entire savings. He owns, I believe, 49%, the family owns 49%, and then a particular member of the family owns 2%. So he's technically a minority owner, but they're very aligned and they had a really good partnership. I mentioned that he invested his entire savings. The next note is all in. And this is something I've said all the time, but you have to be willing to sleep on the floor. Quote from Dietrich Mateschitz is, if things had gone wrong, I would be sleeping under a bridge today. He was willing to go to zero. He believed in it so much. He was so convicted. The vision was so clear in his head that he was willing to risk going to zero, sleep under a bridge. That is a characteristic of many of these men, especially entrepreneurs. These founders, or General Patton, for example, he was willing to die for what he believed his destiny was. And it's a recurring theme between these guys, that they are willing to go all in. They are willing to sleep on the floor. They are willing to go to zero if need be, which is an important lesson. So, as I said, it's kind of hard. It's pretty ambiguous Red Bull's actual philosophies and strategies and tactics. So there's not a ton of in-depth detail about how they did it in this book. It's sort of just like an overview of the timeline, when things happen and things like that. I mentioned already that Red Bull is a private brand, private company. Mateschitz was an extremely private individual. This is all a part of their branding strategy, was like this mystique, this mystery, this dangerous sort of criminal sort of drink. They leaned into this persona of the brand, because I mean the brand was like the words that are used are smuggled, illegal, banned, dangerous. I think somebody even said there was a rumor that went around of them getting the taurine from bull testicles or something like that. And Red Bull never disputed that. They never refuted all these things. To the book. The cans were smuggled in large quantities from Austria to neighboring Bavaria. Dietrich Mateschitz energy drink is a product in which image plays a central role. The illegal import to Germany gave it an added allure of being forbidden, making it even more cult-like. Outrageous rumors, such as the drink containing extracts from bull testicles or secretly being enriched with amphetamines, fueled demand. The company did nothing to counter these quirky rumors. As Mateschitz once said, the most dangerous thing for a brand product is low interest. So they let this stuff happen because you've heard the saying, all publicity is good publicity. They didn't care. The fact that it was illegal in some countries, the fact that it was banned, smuggled, it was like this thing that you had to know, and if you knew, then you were like on the in, and it gave you these superpowers, like their famous slogan, Red Bull gives you wings. Like it's just very interesting. They leaned into it. You'll see a lot of people, like if somebody says something false about your brand, they'll refute it. That was not Red Bull's strategy. They leaned into it extremely hard. They wanted people starting rumors. Okay, so another thing, this is a recurring theme between founders: overpay for talent. Overpay for talent, hire the best people that you possibly can, and they will make their money back if they're really that good. It's just that simple. If you own a business, overpay for talent, overpay for talent. Another thing that he said was that he had an interesting management style, but one of his philosophies was only tell me bad news, because good news will take care of itself. I don't need to hear about that. Good news will take care of itself. People can deal with that. I don't care. Only tell me the bad news so then we can fix it and actually make changes. And not telling me the good news is more efficient than telling me the good news and the bad news, because if I only have the bad news, then I know what to work on and it's not as ambiguous. A second thing, I mentioned it's a privately held company. At no point in the history of the company did Dietrich have any interest of exiting. It was never a part of the strategy. Never. They never took on investors. They never took a loan from a bank. For some reason, he hates banks. He's extremely anti-debt. He said something to the effect of, we will only spend money that we have already earned, not money that we may earn in the future. And that was crucial to them. I mean, they were able, I believe his son, when he inherited it, the year he inherited, his father passed away. Dietrich passed away. His estate was worth like $40 billion. And I think his dividends annually were like $500 to $800 million, which is absolutely insane to think about. He's almost paying himself $500 million to $1 billion a year. This is a quote from Dietrich. "You shouldn't confuse the creativity of the Red Bull brand with our business conduct. I was raised with the motto, don't go into debt. That's also a virtue. I don't believe in the formula 2/3 debt capital, 1/3 equity capital. If something happens in December with sales, or there's some currency depreciation, then you're in trouble. At Red Bull, we spend the money we've earned, not the money we might earn someday." Another time he said, "We never want to endanger the company's existence through expansion, not even for a second." It's the idea that survival is key. If you can't survive, you can't grow. And so he never wanted to risk the company's existence for potential expansion. Very crucial. The other thing about that is that's only possible on a long time horizon. If you have some goal of exiting very quickly in a business, then you can't really do this, because you're not going to be able to grow as fast as you need to in order to get a good valuation on the sale. The only way that you can maintain the no debt, 100% control, no outside capital in a business is if you have a long time horizon and you're completely okay with things taking a very long time. Because without the capital injections, then you can't grow that fast. So you have to sort of just rely on the natural growth of the company, and that takes a longer time. Another thing about his operating philosophy is he was very loyal, extremely loyal. There's somewhere in the book where it says that he never forgot when somebody did a single favor for him. He was He had a ton of long-term partnerships. Loyalty and honor was very important to him. I think he had one, I want to say it was like with the can manufacturer, handshake agreement, as far as anybody knows, for like decades. Hundreds of millions of dollars probably of revenue between these two companies that was done by a handshake agreement. He was a man of his word. He was conservative and traditional in that way, but not in other ways. Sort of like what he said in that quote, don't confuse the creativity with our business conduct. Very, very interesting. That reminds me of the quote I mentioned in the General Patton episode, of essentially along the lines of be orderly and regular in your life so that you can be violent and original in your work. And Dietrich Mateschitz did that to a T. This is a very important thing to understand about Red Bull. The actual mission statement of the brand is the utilization of the Red Bull brand. That's the mission statement as far as I know. The utilization of the Red Bull brand. It's not to make the most high quality, effective energy drinks. It's not to sell the most energy drinks. It's not to blah, blah, blah. It's to utilize the Red Bull brand. Red Bull is a marketing company. They outsourced everything from distribution to manufacturing. The only thing they really did was control the brand and market, which is a fascinating idea. They focus on what they're good at. And you'll see this with like Apple. They do that. They don't manufacture their stuff. Nike doesn't manufacture their stuff. It's marketing. It's all marketing. And Red Bull followed that to a T. It's also about positioning. It's not positioned as an energy drink per se. And like the science is still, I guess, divided on whether or not it's harmful or good for you or not, or neutral, I guess. I think a lot of people think it's bad for you. I obviously don't. Not to a high degree, at least. But they positioned it as an efficiency product that improves endurance, concentration, reaction time, speed, attention, and contributes to overall well-being. According to his own statements, he drinks between 5 and 12 cans daily, which is insane. That's a lot of cans of Red Bull for sure. But it was new, it was different, it was dangerous. It was positioned in a different way than Coca-Cola or Pepsi or other soda or soft drinks. And that was entirely intentional, 100% intentional. To the book. While many large corporations outsource their marketing and advertising activities, thus providing a livelihood for many professionals and even more charlatans, Red Bull took a consistent opposite approach. It outsourced production and distribution and focuses solely on sales and advertising. Essentially, Dietrich Mateschitz company is just a massive marketing machine. Another thing to note that I forgot, I touched on a little bit, but on the no exit thing, we'll get into it a little bit later, but the money was not the goal for him. He stated it many times. It was the freedom. He wanted to control what he worked on, when he worked on it, where he worked on it, how he worked on it, and who he worked on it with. He wanted control. He wanted freedom. He did not really care about the money because he could have exited well before he died for tens of billions of dollars, and he never did it because he didn't want to do that. He wanted control. To the point on marketing, Red Bull cans received a blue cap with an embossed bull. These cans are accepted by all retailers. This move made the Red Bull logo a prominent element, contributing to the brand's further proliferation. As Dietrich Mateschitz once aptly said in a different context, everything is marketing. Everything from the colors, if you're watching, the color, like the blue, yellow, and red colors, the logo, the can, like the little thing that pops the can open, that's got the logo on it. The content, the events that they hosted, the events that they were a part of, the sports that they became a part of, the teams, everything is marketing to them. Everything, every touch point, even the size of the can. You see some cans a little bit similar to this now, but this was a unique can. They used to be short and thick. They had a different can on purpose so that it would stand out and be differentiated. Everything is marketing. The can, the cap, the logo, the colors, the content, the slogan, the sponsorships, everything. Everything. And here's another point on Red Bull. So you'll see this a lot with companies too. They'll diversify a brand. For example, Nike, and this is not wrong or right necessarily. It's just different, and this is what Red Bull did. Nike, for example, shoes, clothes, hats, fitness gear. They even at one point had like a fitness band or something. All these different things, and in different contexts too, like streetwear, loungewear, athletic wear, training wear for this type of training wear for this type of training. Red Bull never wanted to dilute. They never wanted to get away from their core competency, which was an energy drink. Never dilute. That was Red Bull's philosophy. It's not wrong, not right, but never dilute. To the book. Whether it's gummy bears, underwear, leather jackets, perfumes, or skis, Dietrich Mateschitz has rejected all requests for licensing agreements so far. Unlike Porsche or Calvin Klein, Mateschitz wants to preserve the exclusivity of of the Fuchsial Bull, even if it means foregoing millions in licensing fees. Only when the Red Bull grows tired will the boss likely say yes to a licensing product. In the entire world, there's only one shop selling fan merchandise, located on the Salzburg's Gittergasse. I think that's like a racetrack or something. I don't know. Oh, maybe it's a street. Located on Salzburg's, whatever that is, and it's owned by Red Bull itself. The Red Bull brand has set in motion a money printing machine for its owners, and this machine's rotation speeds up year after year. Only one store in the entire world at this point sold branded Red Bull gear, and it was owned by Red Bull. They never wanted to dilute in any way, shape, or form for licensing, different naming rights, or anything like that. They wanted to own everything they did, and that's, as I said, that's a representation of the founder. Another note is nonconformity. They are nonconformists. Dietrich Mateschitz had his own way of doing things, and he was not going to do things for the sake of doing them just because other people did them. To the book. In terms of control, the energy drink conglomerate operates with a notably lean structure. Mateschitz doesn't see any problems with this, stating that Red Bull is not a publicly traded company. He emphasizes that they have no intention of transforming their advantages into disadvantages by implementing structures similar to those of major corporations. He even mentions having declined around 20 board positions himself. So they don't have some big board of advisors. They don't have a traditional corporate structure. It's very lean. It's not a huge team. It's pretty centralized. Nonconformity. They did things the way that they did them. They didn't want to be like everybody else. That's the whole point of the brand. They wanted to differentiate everything they did from the, like I said, from the can, to the colors, to the sponsorships, to the sports they were in, to the slogan, all the way down to the actual structure of the company. Nonconformity. That also goes back to the idea of like ignore conventional wisdom, because conventional wisdom gets you conventional results. On that note, a little bit later in the book, the note is avoid conventional wisdom. To the book. Regarding Red Bull, Mateschitz accumulated his wealth even though, or perhaps because, he doesn't always see eye to eye with certain business principles. When someone tells him that the primary goal of a company is to maximize profits, he considers that notion simply incorrect. Although Mateschitz is a trained salesman, he thinks long-term and broadly. For him, the product's quality and employee motivation are equally important corporate goals as crucial as short-term sales growth, even though they don't appear on any balance sheet. Quote, I don't believe everything I learned at business school, he has repeatedly stated. That's a good lesson. I don't believe everything that I learned in business school. And continuing on that page, back to the note about freedom. Furthermore, he consistently emphasizes that money was never his main motivation for starting his own business. His driving forces were rather the longing for freedom and independence, as well as the joy of work and the realization of projects. One of his mottos is, the journey is the destination. I don't climb a peak to stand at the top, but to ascend. The top is the end. And the note there is just, if you aren't fulfilled on the journey, then what are you doing? Like, if it's not actually fulfilling you doing the thing, getting to the end of the thing will not be fulfilling either. That's not how it works. It's so cliche, but the journey is the destination. Mateschitz believed that, and that's a driving factor for the way that he structured his life, his company, and all those types of things. He truly believed that. He wanted freedom and he wanted independence. I've said this so many times, but it's such a powerful quote in my opinion, but the Sam Zell quote that's something to the effect of, if you go for freedom, you can control what you work on. If you control what you work on, you'll do it for a long time, or you'll do what you love. If you do what you love, you'll do it for a long time. If you do something for a long time, you'll get really good at it. If you get really good at something, money will come. You have to expand your time horizon for that. If you want to go for freedom and you want to be fulfilled on the journey, you have to expand your time horizon. That's just how it is. And Mateschitz did that for sure. So I already mentioned the term cult brand. When a brand, especially early on, is a cult, it has this exclusivity, sort of mysteriousness, this allure that we already talked about. One of the things, we've already talked about it as well in terms of the operating structure and how they did things. They did everything in a nonconformist way. They did it the Red Bull way. And that creates this sort of world that's separate from other companies. And then people see that world and they want to be a part of it, so they're a part of Red Bull. To the book. Cult brands have their own rules. Otherwise, they wouldn't be cultish. Some of them seem to evolve on their own without requiring advertising efforts. They sometimes give the impression of being self-sustaining, an economic perpetual motion machine that ultimately yields success in the form of profits. In truth, Even or rather especially behind cult brands lies a lot of marketing and hard work. Few understand this better than Mateschitz. His success is attributable in no small part to his incredible sense for brand sentiment, marketing, and societal and subcultural developments which find their highest expression in Red Bull's advertising. They were a cult brand, and that was the whole point. That was the entire point. When you drink Red Bull, you're not quenching your thirst. You're consuming a dose of the new generation's lifestyle. You're giving yourself the, quote, wings promised in the commercial. And that lesson is similar to some of the branding and marketing ideas prevalent in Red Bull, but you don't sell the product, you sell the outcome. You don't sell the taurine and the caffeine and the magnesium and the vitamin B6 and all that stuff. You don't sell that. Nobody gives a flying crap about any of that. Nobody cares at all. They care about, what is this product going to do for me? Who am I going to become if I'm a part of this brand world? What will I do? What will I be able to do? How will I grow if I consume this product, if I use this product, if I participate in the world that this brand is building? Sell the outcomes, not the product. Nobody cares about the ingredients of, I won't say that. Some people care. Most people don't care about the ingredients of the product. They care about what the outcomes of the product are. Prime example is the slogan. The slogan was not the cleanest energy drink or the most potent energy drink in the world. No, it was Red Bull gives you wings. People are like, what the hell does that mean? That sounds cool. I want wings. I want to be able to fly. I want to be able to do things that other people can't. It's the outcomes. You sell the outcomes. You position the brand, the marketing, everything to highlight the outcomes, the positive outcomes that associating and consuming this product or this brand will do. To add on to that note, consequently, the presentation of products has evolved from traditional advertising, which communicated a product's functions and benefits, to conveying an image. Use this deodorant or that one, and you'll become irresistible. Smoke this or that cigarette, and you'll experience freedom. Drive this or that car, and you'll belong to the group that has truly succeeded. Drink Red Bull. It may not quench your thirst due to the small can size, but it will give you wings. Products are no longer promoted solely based on their effects. They are imbued with sensory content, laden with an image, with values, with ideologies. In this context, Bowles talks about a spiritual added value. This replaces the need for spirituality that people used to find in churches in earlier centuries. That's referencing this new idea that we've sort of shifted from capitalism, which was essentially the market fulfilling needs, to consumerism, which is consumers driving the market via their desire for change. So a little bit of added context, that's not super important, but the idea remains that you have to sell the outcomes and you have to create an image. It's not ingredients, the actual product. It's the image, the associations, and the outcomes of those two things on a person's lives that a brand or a successful brand should sell. A little bit of added context to that last point about consumerism and capitalism. Attention is, according to German economic philosopher George Frank, the new currency of the economy, as he explains in his theory of the economy of attention. Quote, we live in the information society, and we notice it because we can no longer escape from information. The scarce resource in the information society is not information, but rather the capacity to do something with this information, to select it and process it. In short, attention is a scarce resource, and it becomes even scarcer as the interesting uses for this attention increase. So that's just an interesting thing. I hadn't really thought about that before. I've never been exposed to that idea that we're no longer necessarily a capitalistic society, but more consumerism or consumeristic, which makes sense. We are driven by change. We have an abundance of information. That's not the problem anymore. It used to be information scarcity. And so the goal of marketing was to inform. Now we have no lack of information. The goal of marketing is to feel, it's to make feel, to evoke a certain emotion through marketing, through branding. And that's directly applicable to anybody listening to this that has a business that uses social media, that has their own personal brand, that wants to have a personal brand or have a business that uses social media or content in general. That is the world that we live in. It's also helpful to understand from the consumer perspective, this is what companies are doing. They want your attention. Social media is built to feed off of your attention. So if you know that that's the weapon that they're using, you can better defend against it. So consider that next time you follow a brand or consume content from a brand. They're literally just vying for your attention, not necessarily trying to inform you. I've said it before, we talk about it all the time, but you have to expand your time horizon. The longer the time horizon, the more wise and patient and effectual you can act. When your time horizon is short, you are forced to make sacrifices on things that you would otherwise not have to sacrifice if you expanded your time horizon. To the book. The company doesn't believe in short-term commitments or one-off actions, but rather prefers long-term partnerships, primarily with individual athletes. There are no contracts, only verbal agreements are made to the athletes, promising support to help them fulfill their dreams. This kind of sponsorship shouldn't obscure the fact that the company-owned football teams and racing teams are also follow this pattern. Currently, nearly 600 athletes from around 100 different sports are under contract with Red Bull. From paragliding and cliff diving champions to daring motorcycle and mountain bike enthusiasts, as well as track and field athletes. So that's in the context of like partnerships and sponsorships, but it's still very important. They do not believe in short-term commitments or one-off actions. Expand the time horizon, play the long game. The next note is to control the narrative. Tell your story. As I mentioned, Red Bull is extremely private with what they release. Dietrich Mateschitz, the same exact way in his real life. They were notoriously tight-lipped. They didn't release numbers or very many. They didn't expose their actual strategies and tactics or their inner workings. They were tight-lipped about things that they wanted to keep close to the chest, and they told the story they wanted to tell from their own mouths and then let other people add rumors and non-verifiable things, because that's not the same as a company coming out and just outright telling everybody what they're doing. It was their entire philosophy to control the narrative, to tell the story, to build the world that they wanted to build and leave everything else out. Let nothing else be slipped out. There's stories of even Red Bull got into like TV and newspaper and like publishing businesses are involved in those at one point to be able to tell their story. Like they were involved in that with the sole purpose of telling their story in a more effective, clear way. They controlled the narrative. They controlled the image in every possible channel, whether that was music, writing, TV, events, news, all these types of things. Some of those things didn't end up working out, which reiterates the idea of big winners pay for many failed experiments, because some of them worked out tremendously. But it also just reiterates the fact that they were very interested in telling their own story to such a high degree that they were like involved in the actual publishing and media side of things. I already mentioned the can, but the idea that packaging if the product is good, that's great. But the packaging of the product is also important, because as I said already, and Mateschitz said, everything is marketing. You can think of Steve Jobs as a great example. There's two things. Number one, the computer was great, but if you watch documentaries or read about them, when they were first building it, nobody knew or really cared what the inside of a computer looked like. But Steve Jobs was meticulous and very passionate about the inside of the machine, the inside of the product being just as beautiful and well organized and detailed as the outside. And then one step further, the actual packaging that the product shows up in. I mean, you've gotten an iPhone before. The packaging is like completely perfect. You can like lift up the top and the thing will slide very slowly out. Everything is perfectly clean and protected and very unique. The entire experience is a part of the brand. And Mateschitz understood that from the packaging to the cans, and that's extremely important. Here's a paragraph that just sheds a little bit of light on his background and who he is. Dietrich Mateschitz is probably the most well-known living Styrian, a region in Austria, alongside Arnold Schwarzenegger. He has influenced the global business landscape as few other Austrian entrepreneurs have. The founder of Red Bull is a classic self-made man who rose from humble beginnings. Astrologically, Mateschitz is a Taurus. How could it be any different? Tauruses are said to be persistent, loyal, conservative, family-oriented, and nature-loving. At the same time, they are believed to be stubborn and occasionally possessive. That is absolutely an accurate description of Mateschitz from what information is available. He had an intense desire for privacy. I've already said this so many times. I think he would only do email interviews. Like, I don't think anybody really even heard his voice, because he didn't do TV or radio interviews for like decades. Like literally decades. And I think the one time he did was after an F1 race or something like that. So intense desire for privacy. To the book, Mateschitz keeps his private life almost obsessively secret. This secrecy has led to myths forming, to the extent that in the past, even his own employees doubted whether the top bull actually exists. Quote, recently an American employee greeted me with the words, "Oh, you really exist," Mateschitz once told the magazine Profil. He can laugh about that. However, he has no sense of humor when it comes to personal matters. When Profil journalist Michael Nickbach set out to write a biography about Mateschitz, he quickly realized how closely the man and the bull are intertwined. Nickbach had gained a reputation for investigative work. For his planned book, he began researching in the surroundings and hometown of the RedBull founder. This provoked the anger of the otherwise charming Mateschitz. "You have harassed my mother, and I won't tolerate that," the top bull is said to have told his would-be biographer during an accidental personal encounter. And further, quote, "As long as a perforated kneecap costs $500 in Moscow, you won't be safe." A clear threat for which Mateschitz apparently apologized a few days later in a personal letter, as Nick Bosch writes in a report about his ultimately failed project. So that just shows how intensely serious he was about his privacy. He said, you've harassed my mother, and essentially threatens the guy to break his kneecaps. Pretty serious threat there. But I think it highlights his legitimately intense and obsessive desire for privacy. He did not want people to know about his private life. He wanted that to be secret or private, as it very well should be. It was core to his philosophy, and I think it permeates throughout the entire RedBull brand, which is good because, as we've talked about, people create rumors, which builds intrigue, and intrigue then compels. So rumors and allure and all this stuff, mystery, intrigue people. They want to know. They want to fill in the gaps. They want to know, what's this guy like? Is this guy actually real? What's going on? That intrigues them, so then they become more interested and they have a stronger desire to know. And then when you have a strong desire to know or to actually learn something, you are compelled to purchase or to look up more information and ultimately become a part of the brand. Mystery intrigues, intrigue compels. Another thing that I think is super important, my friend Noah Ryan has been instrumental in my life in understanding this. The idea of understanding your temperament, experimenting and exploring and gathering feedback about who you are as a person. What are your tics? What are you good at? What environments do you operate the best in? What do you not operate the best in? What things do what to you? All of this is information that helps you understand your temperament. And when you understand your temperament, you can put yourself in an environment and do the things that you will excel at. Mateschitz was extremely tapped into his temperament. To the book, here's an example. "I have such a strong laziness component by nature that I don't do anything alone. And as I got heavier and heavier and my condition got worse and worse, something had to happen. Everything that brings me joy in life is connected to a certain level of physical fitness and physical well-being. So it's pure selfishness that I do something for my fitness, certainly not out of ambition." So that was in the example of him hiring a personal trainer. But he understood. He's like, hey, I have such a strong laziness component that I don't do anything alone. If I'm not doing it with somebody, I won't do it. You could look at that as a negative, or if you understood that about yourself, you could say, okay, well, I'll just make sure that I'm doing things with people. I'll hire a personal trainer. I will go work with people. I'll go into an office where people are working. I will go on walks with people. I'll train with people. If you understand this about yourself, and this is just a specific context, obviously temperament is much broader than just in the context of physical fitness and things like that. But the more you experiment, the more feedback you gain. The more feedback you gain, the more you can iterate and get even more information to make better decisions, to put yourself in better places, to do better things suited to your temperament. There's this quote that I love, and I think it's relevant to this. "If you tell a fish it's a horse, it will live its whole life thinking it's stupid." That's the whole point. So if you are a fish and you're in an environment for a horse, you're going to think you're stupid and there's all these things wrong with you. You have these ailments. You maybe have attention hyperdeficit disorder. You have this disorder or whatever. The reality is you're likely just not in an opportune or optimal environment for your temperament. We are extremely unique individuals. Bioindividuality is extremely real. What works for one person will not work for everyone. What works for you will not work for everyone, and vice versa. Figure out who you are, where and how and when you operate the best, and put yourself in those positions. That's what Mateschitz did, and I think that's a very important lesson for us. Okay, so that's honestly, it's a shorter book. That's pretty much all the way through most of the important things. I want to finish with just some notes on branding. I've formulated a philosophy on branding over the years, and this book actually helped me. It helped confirm some of my intuitive opinions or thoughts on branding. For reference, I was in a marketing class in graduate school, and I actually found it to be really interesting. I did a project on the company Yeti, and that's sort of how I formed a lot of this branding philosophy that we're about to go over. I'll say this. So my whole philosophy on branding is that branding is essentially, it's a story. It's a storyline, or a world is a better way of saying it. It's a world. A brand is a world. And you're telling a story in this world with different avatars. So in the context of Yeti was a $400 cooler. And this is relevant to Red Bull, and we'll draw some comparisons here soon. Yeti was a $400 cooler in a world where you could literally go to Walmart and buy a $30 cooler that was the same size. I remember my dad bought a Yeti like 10, 15 years ago, and people thought he was crazy. They were like, what on earth are you doing? Now guess what? Every dude that hunts, fishes, whatever, or most dudes have a Yeti. But to the point, it was a $400 cooler. What they started with, they were building this world. They started with one avatar, and that avatar was it was in the context of fly fishing. So they were building a purpose-built cooler for fly fishing boats. So they started with fly fishing. They built the avatar, hey, if you are an elite fly fisherman, this is the cooler for you. This is the one you need to use, period, end of story. So they told the story to that avatar. Once that avatar was welcomed, once that avatar was built out in the world, they moved to hunting, because there was like, oh, wait, if you're going to use it for fishing, you can use it for hunting. So they got the world's most famous and best hunting guides to tell the story. So now you have fishing guides and fishermen, hunting guides and hunters. Then they were like, hey, what else could you use this for? I guess if you hunt and fish, you might like to cook too. Okay, so we're going to go get the best barbecue and like seafood chefs, and then we're going to build that avatar. We're going to tell the story for them. So they got the best seafood chefs and barbecue chefs to tell the story. Then it was, okay, well, if you hunt and you fish and you cook, then I'm sure you probably, when you're grilling or when you're having people over, when you're watching sports, you probably like to have a cold beer. You like to keep your food cold or your drinks cold. So we're going to make it tailgating. If you're a serious tailgater, then you use Yeti. And now you see all these like custom branded, team branded Yeti stuff. So my whole point is, you build these avatars along the way that when people see the branding, when they see the marketing and the storytelling, they're like, oh, wait, I do that. Could that be me? And the whole point of the brand is to tell the story in such a way that if a person uses your product or associates or becomes a part of your brand world, they are becoming more of who they hope to be. That is that simple. That is my philosophy, at least. A good brand makes people feel like they are becoming more of who they want to be because they are using your product or they are a part of your brand world. Red Bull did this to a T. Number one, they had an elite product. It was better and differentiated. They differentiated in every way possible. They started with the avatar of extreme sports. They were like, hey, if you do extreme sport, and they started even more specific than that with, like, let's say paragliding or mountain gliding. I don't remember the actual details. But hey, look, if you're a paraglider or if you're a motorcyclist, Red Bull is literally what's going to give you the wings that you need to go to the next level to win the X Games or the Olympics or whatever it was. Then they were like, hey, what about F1 racing? And then they bought an F1 team, and that F1 team is now the best team in F1. Then it was soccer. They bought soccer teams. Then it was, so they added avatars until damn near the whole world. I think they actually listed a stat in here that Red Bull has a 90% brand recognition in the global population. That means that 90% of the people that were in this study could recognize the logo and the branding of Red Bull. Think about how insane that is. That's multiple billions of people could identify this little bull. The only way that's possible is by building out this world and having avatars in it that an immense amount of people can fit into. And then, as we stated, can perceive themselves as becoming more of who they want to be by associating with that bull. The author lists 4 success factors specific to Red Bull. Number 1, strong visual identity. Red Bull creates powerful imagery, both literally through photos and videos and metaphorically through positive associations that drive consumer purchases. Number 2, aggressive marketing investment. The company spends a third of its annual revenue, over 3 billion euros, on marketing. Number 3, long-term vision. Red Bull's resilience and ability to adapt make it exceptional among privately held companies. Number 4, conservative financial management. The company remains debt-free, spending only what it has already earned. So that's a little bit about, like, specifically about them in terms of like their overall business practices. But I have a list of notes here on the branding stuff, and I'll just list those out. Differentiated, effective product. That is the number one most important thing. If your product sucks, it does not matter, because if you try to sell positive outcomes and your product doesn't actually produce them, then you're a liar and people will hate you. So have a good product, tell the truth about the outcomes that that product brings. That's number one. Number two, tell your own story. Let everyone else fill the gaps. Tell the story that you want to tell. Keep everything else close to the heart and let people fill the gaps. This builds intrigue. This builds like cult-like following, and it lets people see themselves as a part of the story, as opposed to you just telling every single possible detail. They get to fill in the gaps. It's a little bit more ambiguous in that way. Branding is association. Product X makes me think and feel Y. So when I see Red Bull painted all over the Max Verstappen's F1 car, and he's on the podium every single race, and they're going 200 and whatever miles an hour around corners, I literally don't need to know anything else about, wow, Red Bull is probably a pretty serious, like, extreme brand. I don't need to know what it is. There's something about it that's alluring. That's connected to Max Verstappen going 200 miles an hour around a corner. Branding is association. Product X makes me think and feel Y. So from a marketing perspective, you then think, okay, well, what do I want people to feel? What do I want people to think about my product? And then you just associate with things that make people feel that way. Very simple. Number 4, and lastly, create a content flywheel. This is what Red Bull did very well. They not only created a strong brand, like visual identity of the product, like the actual cans, the color, the logo. They associated with sports like mountain biking, paragliding, F1 racing, all this stuff. That's a part of the content, because what they would do is, if you have, let's use the F1 example, if you have Max Verstappen winning a race with Red Bull all over his body and his car, that becomes content that then Red Bull can produce or can use. They went so far in that direction, actually, where they just created events. Like, they literally created, like, you ever seen the videos of the people flying, like running these man-made planes or flying objects off that pier and seeing how far they could fly? Red Bull invented that, because that's just a crazy, unique, differentiated content opportunity that they can then use. It's very unique. It's compelling. It's funny. It's sort of extreme in that these people are just jumping off a pier with sometimes like planes that just go straight down. It's all about the content flywheel that you can create. That's all I have right now for Red Bull. As I said, it was actually a little bit difficult to piece together. Like, the book was good. It was a good book, and it was very informative, but there's just only so much information out there on Dietrich and Red Bull that there's just a lot of gaps that are left to be filled, which is completely non-ironic that that's what we're talking about, because that's the whole point of their strategy. But I pieced together as much of it as I could. I think there's incredibly important lessons on branding and marketing and building a business, as well as Dietrich as a person. I think he's fascinating. Just the idea of keeping your private life private, understanding your temperament, being able to go all in, all those types of things. So hope you enjoyed. Very interesting story, in my opinion. Until next time, thanks for tuning in.